pulse of him.
I didn't move out right away. The contract was set to start in 3 weeks, and somehow those 3 weeks became the quietest and most emotionally loaded time I'd had in years. I toured apartments after work, places that smelled like fresh paint or old carpets trying to hide their age. Studios with too much light. One-bedrooms with none. I nodded, asked practical questions, pretended I was choosing a layout when really I was checking something deeper. Every time I drove back, I caught myself looking for Noah's car before I even turned into the driveway. He didn't hover. Didn't ask for updates unless I offered them. He didn't treat this like a countdown or a test. If anything, he seemed steadier than ever, like he trusted the process more than the outcome. One night, I came home later than usual. The house was quiet, my parents already asleep, the familiar hum of nighttime settling in. Only the kitchen light was on. Noah was sitting at the table with his laptop open, headphones in, posture relaxed but focused. He looked comfortable there. Like he belonged. I stopped in the doorway without meaning to, just watching him for a second longer than necessary. He felt it anyway. He pulled one ear cup off and looked up, meeting my eyes. His face softened immediately. "Hey," he said. "Find anything?" "Maybe," I replied, setting my keys down and sitting across from him. "Small place. Nothing fancy." He closed the laptop halfway, giving me his attention without making a show of it. "Did you like it?" I hesitated, then shrugged. "I'm still figuring out what like even means right now." He nodded, like that answer made perfect sense. We sat there in silence, not awkward, just shared. The kind of quiet that doesn't ask to be filled. After a moment, he spoke again. "You know, I'm not scared that you're leaving." I looked up. "I'm scared you'll leave and pretend this was just convenient," he added. Like it only mattered because of the timing. Something in my chest tightened, then steadied. "I don't think I could pretend that," I said honestly. "Not even if I tried." He smiled, small, relieved, real, and stood up, coming around the table. He rested a hand on my shoulder, grounding, familiar. That's all I needed to hear. Later that night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling of the guest room one more time. Same familiar shadows. Same quiet house sounds. But everything else felt different. I wasn't counting days anymore. I was choosing how to carry what mattered with me. And that shift, subtle, internal, irreversible, felt like the real beginning of whatever came next. Not a goodbye. Just a transition done gently. Moving boxes is a strange kind of honesty. You don't realize how much of your life exists in half-forgotten objects until you're deciding what deserves to come with you. Old notebooks. Cables whose purpose you no longer remember. Clothes you haven't worn since you were convinced your life was going in a completely different direction. I packed slowly. Deliberately. Noah never rushed me. He helped when I asked, stayed out of the way when I didn't. Sometimes he'd sit on the floor nearby, scrolling or stretching after work, keeping me company without making it feel like a performance. One afternoon, I pulled a box from the back of my closet, the one I hadn't opened since moving back. Inside were pieces of my earlier adulthood. Photos. A cracked phone. A journal I barely remembered keeping. I sat on the bed and flipped it open. Most of it was unremarkable. Complaints about work. Anxiety written in loops. But near the middle, a page stopped me cold. I'm scared I missed my moment. I don't know when it happened, but everything feels late. I exhaled slowly and closed the notebook. "You okay?" Noah asked from the doorway. "Yeah," I said after a beat. "Just realizing how long I've been afraid." He came in and sat beside me, not looking at the notebook unless invited. "Fear doesn't mean you're behind," he said. "It usually means you care." I leaned back against the bed, letting that settle. That evening, we took a break from packing and walked to the small diner a few blocks away, the one my parents used to take me to after Little League games. Vinyl booths. Laminated menus. Nothing fancy. We slid into a booth by the window, knees brushing under the table. So, Noah said, stirring his coffee, what's the thing you're most nervous about with the new place? I thought about it. The quiet, I admitted. Not lonely quiet. Just unfamiliar. He nodded. Yeah. Silence hits differently when it's not shared. I met his eyes. What about you? He smiled, a little crooked. Letting this keep growing. I blinked. That's not what I expected. I've done the version where I hold on too tight, he said. And the one where I keep one foot out the door. I don't want either this time. There it was. Not a declaration. A direction. When we paid and stepped back outside, the air felt cooler, the street lights humming softly. We stood there a second longer than necessary, either of us eager to head back just yet. You don't have to disappear once you move, he said lightly. I won't, I replied just as easily. My last night in the guest room arrived quietly. Most of my things were already in the car. The room felt stripped down, bare walls, empty shelves, the bed still made but clearly temporary now. Noah knocked once before stepping in. Hey, he said. I just wanted to say, I'm proud of you. For what? I asked. For not running, he replied. You could have. I swallowed and nodded. I thought about it. He stepped closer, stopping just short of touching. And you didn't. We stood there in the dim light, the weight of the moment present but not heavy. I'm not saying goodbye, I said. I know, he answered. After he left, I sat on the edge of the bed for a long moment, letting the house settle around me one last time. I wasn't leaving empty-handed. I was leaving with clarity. With something steady. When I finally laid down, the ceiling looked the same as it always had, but it no longer felt like a reminder of what I hadn't figured out yet. It felt like proof that I had. And that realization followed me into sleep, calm and unforced, like a promise I didn't need to say out loud. The first night in my new place was quieter than I expected. Not lonely, just unoccupied. The kind of silence that doesn't echo yet because it hasn't learned the shape of you. The apartment was small, clean, and temporary in that reassuring way rentals sometimes are. Boxes stacked neatly against one wall. A mattress on the floor. A single lamp I'd plugged in because overhead lights felt too exposed. I stood in the middle of the living room for a long moment, keys still in my hand, listening. Nothing creaked. Nothing hummed. No familiar footsteps down the hall. I exhaled slowly and set the keys down. Unpacking took less time than I thought. When you move enough times, you learn what matters. Clothes. Laptop. A few books. Everything else stayed in boxes, waiting for proof they were needed. My phone buzzed while I was fitting sheets onto the mattress. Noah, you good? Me, yeah? Just here, a pause. Then, want company or quiet? I smiled at the screen. Company sounds good. 20 minutes later, there was a knock. Noah stood in the doorway holding a paper bag and 2 coffees, like this was the most natural thing in the world. Housewarming, he said. I stepped aside, letting him in. He took in the place with a slow glance, nothing evaluative, nothing critical. It feels like you, he said finally. I blinked. You've been here 30 seconds. He shrugged. Still. We sat on the floor with our backs against the couch I hadn't bought yet, sipping coffee and eating whatever he'd grabbed on the way. The city sounds outside were faint but present, cars, distant voices, life continuing. This part's always weird, I admitted. The in-between. He nodded. But you're not doing it alone. That landed gently, without weight. We talked about small things. His clinic. A patient who'd made him laugh. The dumb lamp I'd accidentally bought that was already flickering like it was tired of its job. At some point, his shoulder rested against mine. Neither of us commented on it. You know, he said quietly, I don't need us to look a certain way. I just need us to keep showing up. I leaned my head back against the wall, letting that sink in. I can do that. He stayed until it was late enough that the city outside softened. When he stood to leave, he hesitated at the door. Text me when you wake up, he said. Just so I know how the first night went. I will. After he left, the apartment felt different, not fuller, but warmer. Like it had been introduced to something important. I slept better than I had in weeks. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm that surprised me. Work filled my days. Real work. Not perfect, not permanent, but grounding. I walked to get coffee before meetings. Learned which streets caught the afternoon sun. Let the place slowly become mine. And Noah didn't fade into the background the way I'd once feared. We cooked at my place some nights. At his others. Sometimes we didn't see each other for a day or two, and when we did, it felt intentional, not distant. One evening, we sat on my floor again, backs against the couch that had finally arrived, eating takeout straight from the containers. This feels sustainable, I said without thinking. He smiled. That's a good word. I thought about that later, alone in bed, staring up at a ceiling that no longer felt unfamiliar. This wasn't a story about fixing my life. It was about learning how to live inside it, honestly, gently, with room to grow. I hadn't moved back home to fall in love. I'd moved back to slow down long enough to recognize it when it arrived. And as sleep pulled me under, the thought settled easily in my chest. This wasn't the end of something fragile. It was the middle of something steady. And for the first time in a long while, that felt exactly right. There was a moment, somewhere around the third week, when I realized we'd stopped narrating things to each other. No more. This is new for me. Or, tell me if this feels weird. No constant temperature checks. We still talked, obviously, but the conversations had shifted. Less about what this was and more about what our days looked like. What annoyed us. What we were looking forward to. What we were quietly worried about but didn't want to turn into a big thing. One night, Noah came over after a long shift. He didn't bring anything. Didn't apologize for being tired. Just kicked off his shoes, leaned down, and pressed a quick kiss to my cheek like it was muscle memory. You okay? I asked. Yeah, he said, dropping onto the couch. Just empty in the good way. I sat beside him, close but not crowding. You want to talk or be quiet? He smiled, eyes closing for a second. You always ask that. I know. I like that you ask. We sat there while the city hummed outside, his knee resting lightly against mine. It struck me how different this felt from past relationships, not louder, not more intense. Just more present. No sense of auditioning. No urge to rush toward the next milestone like it would prove something. A few days later, my parents invited us both over for dinner. Us. Both. I hesitated when I read the text, not because I was scared of them, but because it felt like a line I hadn't noticed we were approaching. Noah noticed my pause. We don't have to go, he said easily. I want to, I replied after a moment. I just didn't realize how fast this part would come. He nodded. We can leave early. Or stay. Or hide in the kitchen and help your mom like heroes. That made me laugh, tension easing. Dinner was exactly what it always was, too much food, too many questions disguised as concern. But something was different this time. My parents didn't watch us. They didn't hover. They treated Noah like someone who belonged at the table without explanation. At one point, my mom asked him about work, genuinely interested. My dad argued with him about sports. I caught Noah's eye across the table. Calm. Steady. Not performing. Not proving. Just there. Later, when we stepped back outside into the cool familiar air, something loosened in my chest that I hadn't realized was still tight. That wasn't so bad, Noah said. No, I agreed. It wasn't. That night, back at my place, we stood by the window for a while, city lights scattered below us. You know, I said quietly, I don't feel like I'm catching up anymore. He turned toward me. What do you feel like? I thought about timing. About all the versions of myself I'd been worried I'd missed becoming. I feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be, I said. Even if I didn't get here the way I expected. He reached for my hand, fingers warm and sure. That's usually how it works. We didn't kiss. We didn't need to. We just stood there, hands linked, breathing in the quiet certainty of it. This wasn't a story about rebuilding something broken. It was about learning that some things don't need fixing, just room, patience, and the courage to stay when leaving would be easier. And as the night settled around us, that understanding felt less like a revelation and more like a foundation. Solid. Unrushed. Something worth standing on. The first argument we had wasn't dramatic. No raised voices. No slammed doors. Just a quiet, unexpected friction that caught me off guard because things had been so steady. It started over something small, timing, of all things. I texted Noah that I might be late. A project had stretched longer than planned, and by the time I finally shut my laptop, my head felt hollowed out. I drove home on autopilot, already rehearsing the apology in my head even though I wasn't sure why I felt like I needed one. When I got there, he was sitting on the couch, shoes still on, jacket draped beside him. You okay? I asked, setting my bag down. Yeah, he said. Then paused. I just didn't know if I should wait or head out. Something about that landed wrong. I said I might be late. I replied, more defensive than I meant to be. I know, he said calmly. I just didn't want to assume. And there it was, that word again. Assume. I rubbed my face, frustration rising without a clear target. I don't want you to feel like you're always waiting on me. He looked up at that, really looked. I don't feel like that. I just want to know where I fit. The room went quiet. I sat down across from him, the space between us suddenly louder than usual. I'm not good at this part, I admitted. Letting someone see the messy edges while I'm still figuring things out. He nodded slowly. I'm not asking for certainty. I'm asking for clarity. That stung, not because it was unfair, but because it was true. I don't want to lose what this is by putting pressure on it, I said. I don't either, he replied. But pretending we don't affect each other is pressure. Just quieter. We sat with that for a moment, neither of us rushing to fix it. I should have texted again, I said finally. Not because I owed you an explanation. Just because I wanted you to know I was thinking about you. His shoulders relaxed a fraction. That would have helped. I can do that, I said. I want to do that. He smiled then, not relieved, not triumphant. Just softer. That's all I needed. We didn't hug right away. Didn't kiss. We just let the tension drain naturally, like letting a muscle unclench instead of forcing it to relax. Later that night, after he'd gone home, I lay awake longer than usual, not anxious, just reflective. This was new territory for me. Not the falling part, but the staying present when things weren't perfectly smooth. The old me would have pulled back, called it a sign, told himself it was safer to retreat. Instead, I stayed. A few days later, we met for lunch near his clinic. He looked tired but lighter, like the conversation had settled something instead of cracking it open. You know, he said, stirring his drink. This is the part people don't talk about. What part? The one where it's not exciting or scary, he said. Just real. I smiled. I think I like this part. Me too. When we parted ways outside, he squeezed my hand once before letting go. No lingering. No uncertainty. That small gesture stayed with me the rest of the day. That night, alone in my apartment, I realized something quietly profound. I wasn't afraid of conflict anymore. Not because I enjoyed it, but because I trusted what was on the other side of it. This wasn't about perfection or constant harmony. It was about choosing to stay engaged. To speak. To listen. To let someone matter enough that their presence reshaped your habits. I turned off the light and lay back, breathing evenly. This wasn't the end of the story. But it felt like a turning point, the moment where something fragile became something resilient. And that, I knew, was worth everything it took to get here. The contract settled into my bones faster than I expected. Days gained structure again, meetings with real stakes, Deadlines that didn't feel imaginary, a rhythm that asked something of me and gave something back. Some mornings I walked to work, letting the city wake up around me. Other days I stayed late, riding the quiet focus until it ran out. Noah didn't comment on the changes. He noticed them, sure, but he didn't narrate them back to me like proof. That mattered. We started alternating weekends without planning it. One at his place. One at mine. Groceries split without a conversation. Toothbrushes that stayed put. A shared calendar that appeared on my phone one afternoon with no announcement attached. It felt adult. In the best way. One Friday night, after a long week for both of us, we sat on my couch, legs stretched out, some half-forgotten show playing quietly in the background. "You're different lately," Noah said, not accusing. Just observant. I glanced over. "Different how?" "Calmer," he said. "More here." I thought about that. I think I stopped trying to outrun the version of me I didn't like. He smiled. "I always thought he was just tired." That landed gently, right where it needed to. A few days later, he invited me to join him at a work event, nothing fancy, just drinks with people from the clinic. I hesitated longer than I should have. "Too much?" he asked, immediately reading my pause. "No," I said. "Just new." We went. I watched him move through the room with easy confidence, introducing me without explanation, without labels, like my presence spoke for itself. No one questioned it. No one needed clarification. At one point, while he was deep in conversation, someone asked me how we met. I smiled before I answered. At home. It felt true in more ways than one. On the walk back, the night cool and quiet, he slipped his hand into mine without looking. "Thanks for coming," he said. "Thanks for inviting me," I replied. We walked the rest of the way like that, unhurried, matching pace without effort. Later that night, lying side by side in my bed, I stared up at the unfamiliar ceiling and realized something that surprised me. I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. No countdown in my head. No mental exit strategy. Just the present, warm, imperfect, ongoing. Noah shifted slightly beside me, his arm draping comfortably across my waist like it had learned the shape of me over time. "You okay?" he murmured, half asleep. "Yeah," I said quietly. "Just thinking." He hummed softly, content, and settled back in. As the room filled with steady breathing and city noise filtered faintly through the window, I let myself stay exactly where I was. No projections, no comparisons, no rehearsals for loss. This wasn't a story about dramatic gestures or perfect timing. It was about two people choosing each other in small, repeatable ways. About learning that stability didn't mean stagnation. Sometimes it meant growth that didn't hurt. And as sleep finally pulled me under, that truth stayed with me, solid and unforced, like something I could build on without fear. Something that didn't ask me to become someone else. Just to stay. The idea came up casually, which was probably the only way it could have worked. We were standing in line at a bakery on a Sunday morning, the kind that smelled like sugar, burnt coffee, and weekend forgiveness. Noah studied the chalkboard menu like it might personally betray him. "They're opening a new clinic branch," he said absently. "Closer to the river. Bigger space. Better hours." "That sounds good," I said. "You want it?" He shrugged. "I didn't think I did. But lately, maybe." I glanced at him. "What changed?" He met my eyes, then looked away again, thoughtful. "I stopped imagining my life as something I had to protect from disruption." That stayed with me. Later, back at my place, we sat on the floor eating pastries straight out of the paper bag, crumbs everywhere. It felt like a small mess we'd both agreed not to clean up yet. "I got offered an extension," I said finally. He looked up. Didn't hide his reaction, but didn't rush it either. "How long?" "Another 6 months. Same terms. Option to convert." "And how do you feel?" I really thought about it. "I don't feel like I'm buying time anymore," I said. "I feel like I'm choosing it." He nodded once. That sounds right. The weeks that followed brought subtle shifts, not announcements, not milestones. Just decisions stacking gently on top of each other. He started leaving clothes at my place on purpose. I cleared out a drawer without being asked. We learned each other's quiet tells, when I needed space versus when I needed reassurance. When he was tired in a way sleep wouldn't fix. One night, while brushing our teeth side by side, he caught my eye in the mirror. You ever think about what comes after this? He asked, toothpaste foam and all. I smiled. I used to. Obsessively. And now? Now I think after will look a lot like during. Just more settled. He rinsed, leaned against the counter. I could live with that. The word live didn't scare me the way it once would have. A few days later, I went back to my parents' house alone to pick up the last of my things. The guest room was empty now. Clean. Neutral. Like it had already forgotten me. I stood there for a moment, remembering the first night I'd slept in that bed, how heavy everything felt. How temporary I'd been afraid of becoming. I realized something then. I didn't resent that version of myself anymore. He'd done what he needed to do. That night, back at my apartment, Noah was cooking when I walked in. Music low. Sleeves rolled. Comfortable in a way that no longer surprised me. How'd it feel? He asked. Lighter, I said. Like closing a door without slamming it. He smiled. Good. We ate quietly, shared looks over the table, nothing urgent left unsaid. Later, lying together in bed while the city moved softly outside, I rested my head against his chest and listened to his breathing. This wasn't about defining the future. It was about trusting the present enough to let it carry us forward. And as that realization settled, steady, warm, unforced, I knew something important had already happened. I wasn't building a life around this relationship. I was building it with him. That thought didn't rush me. It grounded me. And in the quiet that followed, it felt like the most natural next step of all. The moment that made it real didn't come with a conversation. It came on a Tuesday night, after nothing in particular. I was standing in my kitchen, staring into the fridge like it might offer guidance, when Noah came up behind me and rested his chin briefly on my shoulder. Not lingering. Just a touch, then gone again as he reached past me for a bottle of water. Sorry, he said automatically. You don't have to apologize for existing in my space, I replied. He paused, looked at me, then smiled in a way that felt quietly victorious. That was when it hit me. This wasn't his space anymore. It was ours. Not in a dramatic, keys exchanged, boxes moved kind of way, but in the subtle math of presence. The way he knew which pen to grab. The way I adjusted the thermostat without asking. The way silence between us no longer felt like something to manage. Later that night, we sat on the couch, legs tangled, scrolling on our phones like two people who didn't need to impress each other. You ever worry this is too easy? I asked suddenly. He looked up. Easy how? Like we skipped the chaos, I said. Like we cheated somehow. He thought about it, then shrugged. Maybe we just did the hard parts earlier. That answer stayed with me. A week later, he came over with a folder under his arm. I got the clinic position, he said, setting it down. Closer to the river. Better hours. That's huge, I said, genuinely happy. It is, he agreed. Then, carefully, it might make sense for me to move. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with awareness. Okay, I said slowly. Not away, he clarified. Just closer. To you. There it was. Not a question. An offering. I didn't answer right away, not because I didn't want it, but because I wanted to respond from the right place. I don't want this to feel like a solution, I said finally. I want it to feel like a choice. He nodded. Same. We didn't decide anything that night. We ordered food. Watched something dumb. Let the idea sit between us without pressure. That felt important too. On Sunday, we walked by the river, the air crisp, people passing us without noticing. At one point, he reached for my hand, not checking this time. I squeezed back. "Let's do it," I said. He didn't smile right away. He just nodded, eyes steady. "Yeah." That night, alone in bed after he'd gone home, I lay awake longer than usual, not anxious, just reflective. I thought about the man who'd shown up at his parents' house with a packed SUV and a bruised sense of self. About how convinced he'd been that moving back meant regression. He hadn't known yet that stillness could be productive. That love didn't always announce itself loudly. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop running long enough to be seen. I rolled onto my side, listening to the city breathe outside the window. This chapter wasn't closing. It was widening. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was stepping into the unknown alone, or dragging someone into my uncertainty. We were choosing forward together. Not because everything was figured out, but because we trusted ourselves, and each other, enough to keep going. That trust settled over me gently, like a hand at my back. Not pushing. Just present. And as sleep finally came, it felt less like an ending and more like a deep, steady continuation, one I was ready to live, not narrate.